Roman numeral 6. So now the angel gives the interpretation. He goes, so let me tell you a little bit more now about the fourth beast, about the 10 horns, and about the one horn. You asked about them in verse 19 and 20. Let me break it down in more detail to you. Paragraph B. The fourth beast, verse 23, Daniel 7, verse 23, the fourth beast is not just a man, not just a man, which we found out in verse 17, but he's also a kingdom. He's a man and he's a kingdom. But he'll be different. The angel emphasizes, again, 3 times this is emphasized. He'll have a unique order of evil and cruelty and power. Paragraph C, the 10 horns, the angel says it very clear. And then it's emphasized in the book of Revelation a number of times. So it's an angel interpreting the visions. The Bible interprets the Bible. There's no question about what it means. We don't know exactly which king or which nation and all that, but we know what it is. He says the 10 horns that you were perplexed by are, verse 24, paragraph C, they are 10 kings. They are 10 men. They will be ruling together as contemporaries. Not 10 men who ruled consecutively over history, like 10 generations in a row. Some read this and said the 10 kings, one dies and the next one, the next one. It's not 10 kings in a succession of, the Roman Empire, like some say. It's 10 kings that are contemporaries. They're ruling together. They will arise out of this kingdom meaning the ancient Roman Empire, the people group, the territories related to the ancient Roman Empire. They'll rise, these 10. So we know those 10 kings come from the Europe, Middle East territory and people groups. It says in verse 24, but another king will rise after these 10. So we know the 10 are in place first. So in terms of biblical signs of the times, the 10 will be there first, before the Antichrist is known. Then 3 of them are suddenly assassinated. Probably in close proximity of time, if not at the same time. We don't know, that's conjecture. But this Antichrist king will arise after the 10 are in place and functioning and recognized globally. He goes on to say it again, verse 24, he will be different. He says it in 23. His kingdom will be different. That's verse 23, the kingdom itself. And verse 24, the man will be different. So both the kingdom, the empire, as well as the man, they will have a supernatural dimension of power, and they will have an unprecedented evil and cruelty about them. The kingdom and the man. Verse 23, the kingdom. Verse 24, the man. And the angel says it again. This guy, this little horn, he's going to kill 3 of them. 3 times. Don't make no mistake about it. Now, the way that God lays out the Bible is just such, where it says it 3 times. These 3 are plucked up from the roots, verse 8. These 3 fall before the Antichrist, verse 20. They're subdued, verse 24. And so now as the 10 emerge on the world scene, the prophetic church will say 3 of them will die, and their neighbor will say, where? You go to Daniel, they go, a beast with horns and plucked up from roots. What that means? That powerful man on TV is going to die? I go, yeah, that's right. You need to get out of fantasy land and get into reality, because the Lord lays it out in the scripture to where those that believe him can see it clearly, and those who don't believe him, they can't make any sense. They say, that is where you're basing this? You're kidding. From that cryptic vision of beasts and horns and pompous and what? Yeah, that's where we get it. That's not going to go over that well at the family gatherings. It won't be convincing to people that don't have a heart to believe. But that's how the Bible's laid out. It's laid out just that way. Paragraph E. The characteristics of the horn. Verse 25. He will speak pompous words. That's his blasphemy that's really developed in Revelation 13, verse 5 and 6. He will persecute the saints. He'll be murderous. Interesting, he will intend to change times and law. He will want to have domination of the whole culture and society. And the saints will be given into his hand for time, times, and half a time. Number one, he'll change times and law. Let's look at paragraph 1 here, the bottom of page 5. He will establish legislation that will change some of the most important social and spiritual institutions in the culture. That's what they did in the French Revolution. You know, like 1789, 1790s, in the French Revolution, they changed the calendar. They changed the name of the months. They got rid of the religious holidays so they couldn't honor Christianity. And they had pagan ones, and they changed the calendar so that, you know, December 25th, you couldn't tell where it was, because there wasn't just a 30-day calendar. It was all mixed up. And nobody could tell where they were to celebrate the important dates of history. To remove the influence of those events from culture is the idea. So he'll change times and he'll change law. He'll change the calendar and he'll change law. He'll use the legal system as a tool of oppression. First, he'll take away civil liberties. Then it will progress, and he will actually legislate by law, make it legal to murder the saints. And he'll change times. He'll change the calendar so that the influence of significant religious, spiritual events are lost to the culture. They can't tell, again, they won't know when it was December 25th. They go, no, or that's the idea, is the point. He only makes it 3.5 years, so it doesn't take. But that's what he's after. Top of page 6. We'll just bring this to an end here. It says that he'll prevail. He'll persecute the saints. The saints will be put into his hands for time, and a half a time. What's that mean? There's a God-given limit of 3.5 years. The word time means 1 year. Times is 2 years. Half a time is a half a year. How do you know? That's what that means. Paragraph 2. I'm going to answer you. I'm not Ask Wes in the Q&A. No, it's pretty clear. That's what it means. Because there's 8 scriptures. Look at paragraph 2 in the middle. And 4 phrases that each describe the 3.5 year period. When you compare them, one time it says time, and half a time, and the other time it says 42 months. The other time it says 1,260 days, which is 42 months. And they're the same events, but different terminology, used by Daniel and used by John. When you compare those 8 scriptures together, and the events they describe, time, and half a times describes an event, and then 42 months describes an event, so we know that time, and half a times is the same time frame. And I believe the reason the Lord did this, one of the main reasons, there's probably many reasons, he wanted to make it impossible to dismiss this as just symbolic. Because he said it 4 different ways that cannot be mistaken if you compare them together. It is literally 3.5 years. Paragraph F. In Daniel 7, he says the saints are going to be put into his hands. That means he's going to kill them. That's Daniel 7. It's not for 17 more years, because this is the first vision of Daniel's, of the end of Daniel's life. The 4th one, because he has 4 of them at the end, 4 in his latter years. 17 years later, the angel comes and says, let me tell you why the saints are going to be killed. So for 17 years, he doesn't have the clear answer. I appreciate us having it right off the day 1 here. Daniel 11, it's in one vision. Daniel 11 and Daniel 12 is the same vision. So the angel says it twice in the same vision. 17 years later. It says, Daniel, verse 35 of Daniel 11. Some of those of understanding, the people of understanding, the people who understand what's going on, the prophetic believers, they'll fall. Doesn't mean they'll stumble in sin. It means they'll be killed. In the sense, like it says, these three of these kings will fall. They'll be killed. Remember, we looked at a few minutes ago that 3 in verse 20, they fell. The word fall here means killed. Why? Even some of the anointed men and women of great understanding, they'll be martyred. Why? It will produce an impact in the larger body of Christ to refine and purify and make them white. It'll cause many believers saying, even the favored, anointed ones are being martyred, like the apostles were martyred. And then many believers will say, we need to be in this for God, for real, till the end, no matter what. This is where this thing is going. And it will have a purifying effect. Many people will fall away and many people will be gathered in because they're looking for something to throw their whole life into. And they see the glory of God in the midst of the church. Then chapter 12, verse 10, it's the same vision. The angel says it again to Daniel. It's to purify him. Paragraph H. Then, when the whole process is over, the kingdom, the dominion, the greatness of the kingdoms, plural, all the empires of the earth, under the whole heaven, all kingdoms mean empires or nations, all worldwide, plural. They shall be transferred and given to the people of God, taken from the Antichrist and his leaders, and the saints of the Most High. They'll be given to them, and his kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. All the dominions of the earth will serve and obey the Son of Man, from verse 13 and 14. Paragraph I. Jesus, in Revelation 3, verse 21, he says this. He references this truth. He goes, those that overcome, they will sit with me on thrones. Literally, they will rule the earth with me. Not just spiritually. I mean, there's a spiritual reign now. But I mean physically, the whole earth. You'll have a resurrected body. You'll be involved. Saints with resurrected bodies will be involved in governing, literally governing the earth. John 17, verse 24. I mean, Jesus wants partnership. He's a bridegroom king. He's not just a king. He's a bridegroom king. He wants partnership. And he says right before the cross, I mean, one of the great passages, he says, Father, I desire them. I mean, why are you doing this, Jesus? I desire them, that they be with me where I am forever. They would behold my glory, not just witness at a distance. They would experience, they would encounter, they would be with me in the glory of God, is what he's talking about ultimately here. Beloved, the Son of Man is more than a king. He's a bridegroom king. His plan is so that his people rule with him forever in love. See, why didn't he just wave his hand and everybody rule in love? Because he wants people to rule in love forever who chose love in this age. So he is the ultimate environment for the glory of God and for persecution, for people to choose love to go at the deepest level. And I'll end with this, that God has chosen the least severe means to bring the most amount of people to the deepest levels of love without violating anyone's free will. He doesn't want people ruling in the resurrection who did not choose love in this age when they were in the flesh, in their bodies. He wants people that believed in love and gave themselves to love now, to rule in love over others then. And this is the environment he has chosen in his wisdom. Jesus made it clear, the abomination of desolations, because Daniel remembers the only person in the Bible that used that phrase. It's the central event that helps us understand the negative dimensions of the end times. It's the central event. It's the only event Jesus talked about, political, religious event, that signals the end times. The only one that Jesus spoke about directly. Paragraph D. Now there's many implications to this. Because what the abomination of desolation is, just in one sentence, It's the Antichrist putting an image of himself in the temple in Jerusalem. And when he puts an image of himself, a statue, but it's more than a statue, an archaic statue. It's very dynamic image or statue or idol. But I'm imagining it's going to be state-of-the-art technology with supernatural dimensions and demonic power being manifest around it. Don't think of some archaic old statue. When he puts the image of himself in the holy place in the temple, he says to the nations, now worship me or I will kill you. That's what the abomination is. It's the most abominable thing a man will ever do in history, is to put that statue in the holy place and demand the nations to worship at the pain of death, and he'll have the power to back it up. It's the greatest abomination in history. That's why it's called the abomination. Well, there's a lot of implications, because if the Antichrist is going to put a statue or an image of himself in the temple in Jerusalem, number one, paragraph D, Israel has to be a nation, and they have to have jurisdiction over Jerusalem and build a temple in it. You know, for 2,000 years, the nation of Israel did not have a homeland, and they therefore did not have jurisdiction over Jerusalem, so they couldn't put a temple there. They have to rebuild the temple. They have to restart sacrifices in that temple. All of that is implied by the phrase, the abomination of desolation. Because how can the Antichrist put an image in the temple if there's no temple there? Right now there isn't a temple in Jerusalem. It has to be built. But for 2,000 years, this passage really caused a bit of perplexity to Bible teachers and theologians. They go, how could he put a statue in the temple in Jerusalem? They don't even have Jerusalem. They don't have a temple there. It's never going to happen. But beloved, right now, there's a big movement in Israel to build the temple in Jerusalem right now. And it has to be built. And when that temple is built, that's yet another sign that we are moving in that direction quickly. But the beginning of the Great Tribulation is when the Antichrist enters into the temple, puts the statue, and demands the nations to worship him. That's the great abomination that triggers everything. Jesus said, if you live in Judea, which is the area around Jerusalem, get out of town quick, because the Antichrist is pulling his mask off, and he's going to show himself not as a man of peace. When he does that, he's going to show himself as a man of terror and a man of rage and power and cruelty. Leave quickly when you hear news that that man went into the holy temple, the holy place in the Jerusalem. Now, paragraph 1 under D, the big obstacle is there's a Islamic mosque there right now on the place. So somehow, and I mean that's so I don't know what the word is, but it's so dramatic worldwide, because Jerusalem is going to have a temple on the place where there's an Islamic mosque. Now, how's that going to happen? And the narrative that most people embrace that believe in literal end-time prophecy is the Antichrist will show himself as a man of peace. He'll bring peace in the Middle East, and in the negotiation of peace, he will cause the agreement to allow that temple to be there. Now, that's going to be really big, because that mosque in Jerusalem is the third holiest site in Islam. And I go, there is no man without supernatural power that's going to make that change. But the Lord is orchestrating it, and the Antichrist will have demonic powers, but it is God's will. He's going to let it happen, and the nations will be just amazed when Jerusalem gets to build a temple there, or they get to have a functioning temple. We don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. So that implies, again, the narrative is that he's going to bring peace in the Middle East first, and then he's going to tell the Jewish nation, hey, I'll give you a temple, and I'll let you put sacrifices, daily sacrifices, like in the days of Moses. And Israel, the religious community of Israel, they will be so excited, they'll buy the peace treaty. They'll say, okay, if you'll give us that. But the problem is, after a little bit of time, the Antichrist stops the daily sacrifices, says, no more sacrifices. He's going to break the covenant. He's going to pull his mask off. I'm not a man of peace. I'm a man of war. I'm a cruel man. I'm a beast. You're not going to offer sacrifices to the God of Israel. You're going to worship me or I'm going to kill you. And he's going to make them stop the sacrifices, which means they cannot practice their religion towards the God of Israel in the way they understand it. That's the narrative of what's going on here. Paragraph E. The abomination of desolation is mentioned 8 times in the Bible. Now it's mentioned 4 times by Daniel, the phrase, some form of the phrase. Jesus is quoted 2 times saying the phrase. And then Paul the Apostle and John the Apostle, they don't use the phrase, but they describe the reality of the abomination of desolation without actually using the phrase, the abomination of desolation. Top of page 2. Okay, just to be real simple, and I just want to be as super simple and clear. What is the abomination of desolation? Well, I've already said it 3 or 4 times, but I'm going to do my main gift. My main gift is repetition. Paragraph A, I just want to say it a little bit different so you go, I really got it. The abomination refers to specific deeds, abominable or evil deeds that are done. These deeds are an abomination to God. That's how it gets the term. It's very evil to God. These deeds, these abominable deeds, they lead to desolation, or another word for desolation, they lead to destruction. Destruction of what? Cities, nations, people. There's destruction that is the result of these abominable deeds. Paragraph C. Now, when the Bible describes the abomination of desolation, in the New Testament, the emphasis is the Antichrist putting his image in the temple. So the New Testament mostly develops that idea. The Old Testament, they don't talk about the image in a direct way. The biggest thing the thing that Daniel emphasized most, that the angels told Daniel, it was really the angels giving it to Daniel, is that the sacrifices would be stopped, which means this evil leader who showed himself as a man of peace will take his mask off, show himself as a man of war, a cruel man, and he will stop their religious practices to the God of Israel and demand that they worship him as God and forsake the God of Israel. That's what it means when it says he stops the sacrifices. He's telling them you cannot do religious practices to the God of Israel. You have to now worship only me and disregard him. That's the bottom line point. When the angels told Daniel over and over, this evil man is going to stop the sacrifices. He's going to interrupt the Jewish religious practices and make them illegal. That's what it means by stop the sacrifices. Paragraph D. The abomination, the evil part, will occur 2 ways. Part number 1, the first part of the evil, abominable deeds is the Antichrist is going to demand to be worshiped. He says, I demand it. God says, that's an abomination to me. You demand it. But number 2, the second part of the abomination, millions of people are going to accept it. That's an abomination to God, that the masses accept it. Both of them are 2 aspects of what is abominable or what is evil in God's eyes. Well, paragraph E, the desolation or the destructions, in other words, you could put for desolation, it will occur in 2 ways. Number 1, the Antichrist will cause desolation. Anybody that refuses to worship, he's going to try to destroy them. If a nation refuses, he's going to attack them. If people refuse, he's going to give the mark of the beast and says, I'm going to starve you out, and if I catch you as a criminal of the state, I'll make it illegal, I will have you executed. So he's going to create destruction to anybody, well, he's going to try to. He's not going to succeed. As I've said before, and it will be really clear when we get to Daniel 11, the Antichrist wants world leadership, but he never gets it. He has influence in every nation, but he does not dominate every nation. Even at the very end, there are nations resisting him. Even in the last weeks and months, There are nations that are resisting him, not because they love Jesus per se. They don't want this evil man. Just like nations resisted Adolf Hitler, not because they were just devout. They didn't like Adolf Hitler. And I mean, there will be godly leaders in some of those nations. That's not my point. But my point is this man's evil will be so apparent to many that nations will be resisting him to the end. He never, ever conquers all the nations, because some people have the idea all the nations will be under his dominion. He will be influencing, he will be harassing, he will be trying to dominate every nation, but he won't succeed. So he will cause destruction he will try to cause destruction to whoever refuses to worship him. He will succeed in many places, but not entirely. But number two, the destruction comes another place. It's from God. For the people who do agree to worship the Antichrist, God releases judgment on them. So you get the Antichrist judgment if you say no, and you get God's judgment if you say yes to the Antichrist. This will cause desolation all over around the world. If you say no, the Antichrist is attacking you with great force. If you say yes, God is coming after you with great force. What? This is intense. That's why it's called the abomination that leads to this global destruction. Not that the whole world will be totally destroyed, but the world will be in desolation when it's over. But it's at that time where the great harvest comes to its fullness. I believe the church will be here in power through this time period. I don't believe the popular idea that we're going to be raptured out and watching from heaven. I believe the church will be in the power of God, in the midst of the battle, the great harvest of the nations, the power of signs and wonders taking place, and the church will be purified and have victory. There'll be a great falling away, but there'll be a great ingathering in the nations with great power. And the church will be purified in this context. People that aren't sincere will say, I'm tired of this Jesus thing. And people that are sincere, they will walk in deep commitment and purity.